Hey guys, thanks for joining me for the News from the Real World podcast.
Yeah, wouldn't miss it.
Yeah. So,
I'm Matt.
I'm Margo.
I'm Kat.
and I'm Lauren. Our first article today comes from The Guardian, and it's called The Name Game, Do Play Titles Matter? Let's dive in with this one. So this article is about the importance of play titles, and how sometimes play titles come out of devised work and you have trouble marketing them, but that ultimately the audiences really do take a chance on the play title. Have you guys seen this in action? Have you not gone to plays because of a bad title? Have you been drawn into plays because of a title?
I mean, I think having a really interesting title could bring in more ticket sales, and just because if it's some like long kind of funny or ironic title, people are more likely to buy tickets for it than if it's like an unknown like Helen, and like that's the title of the play. I think it has power. I don't necessarily think it's going to detract from sales necessarily. So
Yeah,
I
think the title can be a marketing tool, but if the title doesn't tell you anything about it, or if it's difficult to remember or pronounce, then people will actually be less likely to talk about it if they don't know how to pronounce it.
well, because if they can't understand the title, then they'll be like, I won't think I'll understand the play.
Yeah.
Which isn't necessarily true, but like I feel like that might be something that people actually do say in their head. If I can't pronounce that, like I won't be able to do anything in watching it.
I also think that I personally am turned off by a bad play title, like Mud. I don't mean to like call names here, but Mud's not a very appealing title, and that's probably intentional on the playwright's part, but like I don't want to go see that show.
But there's something, I think, so I like the play Mud, so I'm indifferent towards the title, so I think like the play can, because I'm sure there's like, there's really crappy play titles of great plays, like for whatever reason Eugene O'Neill I thought is terrible at naming plays, like he just says what it is, so it's like
I disagree.
A Moon for Misbegotten,
No.
A Long Day's Journey
That's
into
my
Night.
favorite though. That's
Like,
one of my favorite play
like
titles.
you couldn't think of anything better than that. So I guess my point there being is that regardless of the title of the play, if the play is good, it can change how the title is perceived. And if the play is bad, I think that, like I was trying to think of terrible plays with terrible names, I couldn't remember any. So if it's bad, it's forgettable. So I think that the title matters, but I don't know about scaring audiences away. I think, like Kat said, it's kind of can go out both ways.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, in the modern era of sort of celebrity theater, it seems like often the name is not. It almost doesn't matter what it's about. Like all these audiences who are buying tickets for untitled play by such and such at the Royal Court,
Right.
they're buying it because of the playwright's name or because of who's
An
in
actor,
it.
or-
Like they talked about Alice and Peter that has
Judi
Dame
Dench.
Judi Dench in it, and that other dude
Yeah.
from.
Doesn't
that
matter
Bond
what that
movie.
play is called.
Right,
People are buying tickets.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. It could be called Mud.
Well, that's
people-
they also.
Yeah.
I mean, they also mentioned. I don't remember what play it was, but it was Helen Mirren Inn was literally how it was
the
marketed.
audience. Yeah.
It was like you didn't even have to read the rest of it because they basically titled it Helen Mirren in the audience.
I mean,
So-
by the same token, though, a good play title can draw me in emotionally, or at least give me a hint emotionally of what to expect. And that's something that I think I look at when I'm going through the newspaper and looking at the show to see. That is something that I react to. And I think a lot of people, if they're going to New York and there's, hundreds of shows playing, that is something that will catch your eye. So I think producers do look for a good play title.
Right. Name your play carefully.
Not
And
Mud.
I also think there's a weird, not fight, but opposition between what producers want and what a playwright or a director might want.
Sure.
Because it was mentioning, especially in devised work, it's purposeful to not name it because they want the actors to come in with a clean slate and not have any preconceived notions of what the play's going to be about or why.
Mm-hmm.
And a producer obviously is not going to like that as much because it's harder to market. So, yeah, I don't know. It's just
It's
see.
a fascinating
Yeah.
look at this. I don't think I've ever really thought about that. I've reacted to it, but I've never really thought about why. So.
Yeah, it's an
Yeah.
interesting. Sometimes in Theater Lab, which is where the playwrights present a lot of sort of short plays of their new work, as an exercise, we will try to name the plays because they do have titles, but only the people who are in them ever knew what the titles were. So after seeing something to think about, well, what would you name that? What really encapsulates the idea of that play? It's actually really difficult. So
Interesting. Let's move on to another article. What is next on our list here?
Shakespeare.
Let's talk about Shakespeare.
So, this article was from the Daily Mail Online, which is a British newspaper. There's a long title, which basically tells you what the whole article's about. Essentially, it asks,
It's a good title.
was Shakespeare a tax dodger? Bard was ruthless businessman who exploited famine and faced jail for cheating revenue. So it actually brought up some really interesting points that we kind of idolize Shakespeare as this, pioneer for the poor man, and in fact, this article claims that he was a tax dodger and also a food hoarder during famine, and was a wealthy landowner who would save all his grain so that he would jack up the price and then sell it to his poor land dwellers, I guess.
The serfs of the bard.
Of the bard, yes.
Yeah.
And part of it was the article claiming that he wrote a lot of his plays based on his experience as the villain, essentially, instead of the, hero of the poor people, like so many people think. So what do you guys think? Was Shakespeare a villain, essentially?
Well, I mean, I think it's interesting that we expect artists to be these pure souls and like the Impressionists who are really these starving artists all their lives. Oh, that's so romantic. But, he never had any expectation. There was no copyright.
Right.
He never had any expectation he was going to benefit off of his plays after their run was closed, right? So it's not like he was making millions of dollars. Not
From
like
his
any
plays.
playwright ever has made millions of dollars. Right. So not that makes it okay for him to dodge taxes, but I just think it's interesting that we feel so betrayed that he was a businessman.
Shakespeare is one of the most romantic playwrights in history. We think of him and we have this great, uplifting picture of what Shakespeare is. So I think this really sheds an interesting light on his work in that context, and I think you maybe have to reanalyze it a little bit, that we can't put him on this pedestal because, obviously a real human being trying to survive, but it does shift the perspective a little bit.
I don't think it means we need to rethink how we've interpreted his plays, though. I think his
It's-
plays have their own merit, and whether Shakespeare was like a woman or a tax dodger or a poor peasant, sure, in some ways, that'll affect how you read it, but in a lot of ways, those plays have been interpreted in so many different, through so many different lenses that I don't necessarily know how much it really changes.
I guess what I think is that we have to look at the author's intent, and I think the context is really important here, so that they very much do stand on their own, and I don't think the interpretation will change, but I think that there is room for scholarship to, shift it in a different direction, maybe.
I don't know. I think Shakespeare is bigger than Shakespeare at this point, right? So I think
Yeah.
what upsets us about all the Shakespeare reimagining and revisiting his identity and all this is this idea of bardology, where Shakespeare can do no evil because he's Shakespeare. And I think what this specifically kind of gets at is the idea that not only is Shakespeare, let's say, the world's greatest playwright, but he's the bohemian that made it. Right, so went to London, was auditioning for plays. He was, in the King's Men or wherever it was, and he climbed his way to the top. He made it as a playwright, as an artist. That's what we all want to do. He actually didn't. He just sold grain for cheap out of his trunk, and that's, and that's how he made his money. And we don't like to think of our gods as that. But I don't know. I kind of read this and I thought, big deal. I mean,
Yeah.
sure. I mean, who knows? We're not gonna be able to ask him, unfortunately.
It's true.
But
So what you're saying is we should all start selling grain out of the backs of our cars.
Yes.
to make a living, yeah, well, because
Yeah.
this is just another example of a bohemian trying to climb the ladder of the creative class, which he can't do it because the man's holding him down. We talk a lot about that in here. That's it. I'm done.
And he did fine. Still around.
And his plays are great, and we're gonna love him forever. So
There
who
you go.
cares?
I don't think this will affect the people that really love
No.
him.
Yeah,
at all,
absolutely
so-
not. It'll piss him off a little bit,
Yeah.
but
They'll get over it, and
Yeah.
they'll forget and hold him up again. So
Yep.
it's all good.
for sure.
Let's move on to another article. We're going to talk about religious protest in the theater.
Oh yeah, so I actually had some strong reactions to this, which were a little bit surprising if you knew me or not. So the title of the article was "Religious Protest Greet Broadway's First Performance," and it was an article about a brief mentioning of this play, "The Testament of Mary," is getting protest by this Christian conservative group, the American Society for Defense of Tradition, Family, and Property. Those are the big three things. TFP, they call themselves. I went on their website, did a little bit of research. So the play, it's sort of this, it's a one-woman show. It's told from the first person, so it's Mary, and it's after the crucifixion of Christ. And so she's kind of reflecting on his life, and you hear her side of the story is how it's being articled. And this conservative group is protesting it mainly because it's blasphemous, right? So it's saying things that are not true. It kind of, I don't even know I guess it would shed a different light on Jesus other than what the Son of God that he's talked about in the Bible is. It really kind of humanizes him, and also kind of sounds like Mary doesn't really like her son a little bit. She kind of disagreed with some of his career choices, which, come on, it's Mary. But also, a lot of the student comments, I want to open the conversation with this, a lot of student comments didn't find the connection between the subject matter of the play, which is something that, sure, people can take offense to and protest, and everyone has a right for certain beliefs. But it seems like what they were really upset about was the fact that it was a novel. The person who wrote the novel, who directed the play, and starred in the show are all homosexuals, and they were saying this is note of like, well, I forget the quote, but I don't know. So what do we think? Like, do they have the right to protest this because of who the artists are? Or?
I saw the show on Broadway the night after this protest happened.
Oh yeah, how was it?
It was fantastic. I still think about the show, so go see it if you can. They absolutely do have the right to protest, but having seen this piece, I think it is absolutely worth producing, and it's important because it goes against. I think it challenges a lot of what we think about this story, and it sheds light, kind of shifts the perspective a little bit.
So I haven't seen the play, and a lot of our viewers probably, I'm sure, haven't seen the play. What did you think? Like, do you see the reason? Like, so sometimes people protest things, and it's like, oh, just stop, go home. But sometimes you're like, oh, wow, that is shocking. Like, was it shocking?
Yeah, it was. I understand where the controversy is coming from. They do depict Mary as a human being, and I think that, religiously she is kind of held up as, divine in a lot of ways, and, Christ obviously a divine figure, but I think the play really grounds her in her emotional connection to Jesus and looks at her journey, how much pain she was in while he was going through this. And I think it looks at her story. She felt neglected by Jesus, and that's kind of the perspective that this whole thing takes. And she's disappointed that he's forgotten about his life to help all these other ungrateful people surrounding him. And that's kind of the message of the play. So I understand where the controversy is coming from. Absolutely.
Yeah, I tend to, I think, like some of the commenters, I tend to be a little skeptical of the sort of legitimate protests when people start putting, presumed
And
bigotry.
they're gay.
And it was made by a bunch of homos. I mean, it's like, okay, well, you just totally undercut your argument there because now I just think you're prejudiced, and that you have not approached this with an open mind, and you have made judgments about this based on the sexual orientation of the artists.
It's absurd. It's absolutely absurd.
Yeah. So that to me, I mean, of course, obviously they have the right to protest, but I mean, I liked what the producers said, which is, we hope they come and see the play and that they keep an open mind.
Well, what I love about this is that I was not expecting to see this on Broadway. I think it is fantastic that a show like this has made it to that level, and I think that's the kind of work that's going to move society forward in a lot of ways. I was shocked that this made it all the way to Broadway. Not that it's not worthy of it, but that they would take a chance to put something this controversial on Broadway.
Yeah.
And I think that does a lot for both sides of the argument. Right? So my initial reaction to this was, oh, those stupid Christians, like, go home, go back to church, like, but, sorry. But then, my second reaction was, well, you know what, good for them, because they're standing up for something they believe in, and art is challenging, right? So it challenges your beliefs as well, so it makes you reflect and think about it. So this was a group saying, hey, this is what we think, this is what we believe, this is what we're standing up for. But also, too, the opposite is true, right? So this type of storytelling is saying, hey, let's look at this subject matter and tell a different story with it. And we're not trying to do anything bad by you. So I think it's great that, like you said, this is going to Broadway and it's getting protested, because it means that sort of the attention is on this type of storytelling, on these artists. So I think it's a great thing for both parties.
The conversation's happening.
Yeah.
Their intention with bringing the show to the public is coming too.
I mean, I agree with Margo, though, that this article really brings up a good point about perception, and, like, if you disagree with something, you absolutely have the right to do that. You absolutely have the right to protest it. But it's just good to be careful of how you couch your argument and what, like, saying, like, that they have some valid arguments of, this isn't biblically, a correct story, and so they don't want people misinterpreting it, but at the same time, then to also throw in, but really it's because they're all gay.
Yeah.
Like, those are two very different arguments they're making, and
part,
one is valid and one is not. And so it's just good to, like,
Yeah.
for everyone to just kind of think about, like,
Right. If you're
how-
going to enter into something and
Right.
expect people to hear you and have dialogue, probably personal attacks
Right.
should not be part of your protest.
These are some of the best artists and playwrights that we've got in the business.
Fiona Shaw.
Right.
Go.
This was a spectacular performance. If you guys have a chance to go see it, do it. Cannot recommend it enough. We're going to end this episode with an article from the New York Times. I think a very powerful article from the New York Times. This article is entitled Politics Spills Onto Stage in Budapest. And this article addresses a performance of Angels in America at the Hungarian National Theatre, and talks about the social context that this play has been produced in. So this production is directed by Andrei Serbin, and Prior is played by the artistic director of the theater, Robert Alfoldi, who has gotten a lot of criticism from politicians in Budapest for his work, for staging Angels in America, for himself being homosexual. So socially right now, Hungary is not in
A great place.
It's not in a great place. And there's a lot of anti-Semitic, a lot of homophobic language that's being allowed in the government, at the very top levels of the government right now. So it's kind of incredible that they're staging Angels in America in that social climate. What was your reaction to this article?
I loved this article, and I'm really happy that we get to talk about it. And my reaction to it was, I started thinking about kind of the difference between public opinion and government, which, you know, is a big thing, but it's also been a big thing even in the last couple days with, like, the gun lobby and the Senate vote yesterday, and and, like, to think about, like, this article says, like, they're sold out till June, like, they get standing ovations every night from, the public that is seeing this and is living in this climate where they're starting to have these, anti-Semitic and homophobic comments made from, the government leaders. And so I think it's just a really good contrast to think about, that theater can be a, way to protest, if that,
Yeah, I mean, I think what was really interesting to me is that this speaks so much of the power of art in this particular culture, that in America, I mean, we just talked about this protest, but that's about as riled up as people get about theater. People don't see art necessarily as something that is politically threatening.
Or as a vehicle for social change.
Or as a vehicle for social change, whereas in Hungary, or I was thinking about the Belarus Free Theater, which has been in the news a lot in the past few years. Like, these are cultures where theater is seen as a way to make social change, and that the government monitors and tries to exert influence on, which really just makes it more powerful, because clearly the audiences here understand what's at play and what's at stake. And, I imagine that's part of, like, the support that they're showing. I mean, that the article talks about, it's not just a standing ovation for great performances, it's for the ideas of, sort of democracy and independence that are inherent in the play.
Right, there's a very close connection between the political party system in this country and the evolution of how the party swings politically, and, like, appointment of artistic directors and board members on, and, that would be so interesting if, like, the chairman of the NEA was actually meant something to the president, that, I don't know.
Or the government saw theater as a threat.
Right.
Yeah, which is more powerful,
Yeah.
certainly. And that's why, because, for whatever reason, sort of this post-Cold War country has sort of evolved into the thing where the art and politics are sitting at the same table, which is great.
Yeah.
I mean, I also think it's incredible that they're staging Angels in America halfway across the world in Budapest. That's incredible to me.
And that was what was surprised me most about this article. So, like, I kind of think Angels in America is dated. So I saw it over the summer at a different theater. I saw it when we did it, and I kind of felt, other than sort of the questions of gender and sexuality, all the political things, like all the Cold War stuff, I thought, okay, so what? Like, doesn't matter to me anymore. I'm American. It happened years ago. I'm way past it. And that stuff kind of, through translation, in terms of thematic translation, like, was more powerful there, because it wasn't necessarily about Reagan, about Mormonism. It was about the issues, like, and so, like, that. So I think it's a great testimony to Tony Kushner that his play speaks even louder. You know what? 20 years later,
Yeah.
across the sea in a different political, social climate.
Yeah, he has this great, Tony Kushner has this great quote, "Theater lasts longer and speaks to more people and travels better over time when it hasn't been created exclusively for the purposes of provoking." Right? So this isn't an agitprop sort
Right.
of, play. It was written to sort of be of its time and to address the issues, but it wasn't about, it wasn't a protest
It
play.
wasn't right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, and therefore it can translate into all these different sort of social milieux, if you will,
Right.
and clearly cause some trouble in Hungary.
I have a quote that I just want to read. I know you just read one, but this was at the end of the article, and it said, "Ultimately, the ovation that the Budapest audience gives Mr. Alfoldi and his colleagues may be less a celebration of the play and performance than a demonstration of political support, looking for angels wherever we may find them, even in the theater." That was pretty incredible.
Yeah, power of theater.
So I guess we'll keep an eye on Budapest and hope for the best in their political situation. So I think that's all for
For
our
this
first
one, yeah.
episode. Good chat.
Great, thanks.
Good
Yeah.
stuff.
So I'm just going to do the intro again. Should we say names again?
Yeah.
Matt, you start with the names once I finish.
Yeah.
It was like,